Hello, Heinrich Arnold from the Bruderhof, back with another Sunday serving, Words of Hope from the Gospel for this beautiful Sunday, June 7th, 2020. Before we get to Words from the Gospel, I want to reflect a bit on the recent happenings in our country and the whole world over the past 2 weeks, but really over the past year. It's been quite a challenging year. We've had the coronavirus with its devastating effects sweeping the whole world. Our country in particular was heavy hit with over 110,000 deaths, about 400,000 deaths worldwide. But even more than the deaths and the suffering from the sickness, there's been the effect from the shutdown, from the isolation that has been put into place to combat it, which has been important, but it's taken a toll on all of life and all of people. The closing of schools, the loss of employment and livelihood, the inability to come together to gather for worship in our churches, in our synagogues, in our mosques, the inability to come together and support each other as families, to visit each other, to recreate together. And this has really taken a toll on all of society, a damaging effect, but particularly on our youth, on our children, and on our elderly. Now, as if this wasn't bad enough, recently we've been caught up after watching this shocking video of the death of George Floyd, a black man who was killed at the hands of police during an arrest in Minneapolis almost 2 weeks ago. This cold-blooded murder really has shocked us to a core. It is wrong. Murder is wrong. Police brutality is wrong. Racism is wrong. And there's been a movement of protest, rightly so, that has swept across many cities in our country and really the whole world. But not only that, there's also been rioting and violence and anger that's been seething under the surface that has now erupted and caused a lot of damage in our cities, with looting, with breaking into stores, with people being hurt. And that is wrong too. So how do we face this together as a country, as a people? I had to think of the famous and beloved Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who stood up as a leader in the civil rights movement and led the people, both Black America, but all of America, on a path forward. And he said that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's why it's so important that this country is standing up and acknowledging that there is something wrong here that needs addressing. But Dr. Martin Luther King also said that returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And those are such important words, truth from the gospel really, that the only way to combat evil, to combat hate, to combat racism or any other form of hatred or darkness is with love, is with light. So we need justice. We need justice in this country. There needs to be justice for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for Ahmaud Arbery, but there also needs to be justice for David Dorn, a black police officer who was killed by looters during the violence. And there have been about 5 other police officers killed recently in the line of duty as a result of this rioting, and many others injured. So that is wrong, and the destruction of property is wrong. So we need to come back to biblical justice, this concept that everybody is made in the image of God. Every life is sacred. And as believers, as followers of Christ, we are called to something different. We're called to a different way, a way of truth and justice. We need to stand up to injustice, but we need to do it with love. The Bible is full of this concept of true biblical justice. The prophets spoke about it. The prophet Amos spoke about it. He said that hate evil and love good, and establish justice in the gate. He talked about justice rolling down like waters, beautiful words. And Jesus gave a very simple definition of justice. That's the golden rule. The golden rule, which appears many places in the Bible, and actually I think every heart knows it and ascribes to this idea that we should do good to others. He said, do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. And he also said, love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that is key, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And who is our neighbor? It's really anybody we meet. The story in the Bible, the example Jesus gave was the parable of the Good Samaritan, where a man who was robbed and beaten at the side of the road and left as good as dead needed help. Otherwise he would die. A priest came along, should have given help but didn't, because he didn't want to become unclean, so he left the man and went his way. A Levite came by and did the same. He ignored him. But then a Samaritan came along, and the Samaritans were a people that were looked down upon. They were not thought of favorably in those days. But this Samaritan, he stopped, and he gave the help that was needed for this poor man. He administered justice. He bound up his wounds. He gave him water. He brought him to an inn. He paid out of his own pocket to help this man recover. That is what Jesus said true justice is. That is what Jesus said our neighbor is, whoever needs help. So what we need to do is step across any divide, any racial divide, any societal divide, any socioeconomic divide. We need to listen. We need to find out what is on the hearts, what is troubling society. We need to listen. If there's a way we need to change, we should change. We should reach out a hand. We should stand up for truth and justice. I think that is the call of this hour, is to come together as a people, to stand up for justice, but to come together, to love, to forgive. Jesus talks about anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love. So we need to love, we need to come back to love. This is an opportunity. This shaking of our country by these events is an opportunity. We shouldn't miss it. Many people are upset. We should not miss this chance to listen, to heal wounds, to forgive, and to come together and to treat each other as true neighbors. We need to celebrate differences. We need to celebrate the different colors, the different backgrounds. We need to try to understand each other. But we should not discriminate at all when it comes to justice. We should treat everybody the same under the law and as people. You know, the Apostle Paul said that Christ is all and Christ is in all. And that is so true. Christ is all and Christ is in all. Yesterday was the anniversary of Robert Kennedy's assassination. Robert Kennedy was a man who stood up for justice in our government alongside of Martin Luther King during the Civil Rights Movement. Here's a beautiful quote that he gave in a speech in South Africa about standing up for justice and spreading hope. He said that each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. Isn't that beautiful? A tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy, and daring those ripples to build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. So that's what we need to do, each to make our own little ripple, a ripple of hope, and those ripples cross together. I want to end this with a word from the Apostle Paul from Colossians 3:12 through 15. He said, "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against each other, forgive each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so also you must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body, and be thankful." So that wraps it up, these words of hope. How can we face this crisis? It is in righting the wrong. It is in true biblical justice. It is in forgiveness. It is in love. It is in treating our neighbor as we want to be treated ourselves. So let's take hope in this, and let's go forward together as a people. We shall overcome. Have a wonderful day.